this session was postponed twice due to other circumstances. We had more than 100 people registered, but I think because of those postponement, it will definitely affect the attendance, but we are not concerned about that. For now, we'll share what we have with those that are available. So my name is Memory Ngui. I'll take you through the presentation, and then we can have questions at the end. So we are going to talk about the science of and business case for employee engagement. We do know that there are a number of organizations that do carry out employee engagement. Others have not started, others do not do it at all for various reasons. And we do think that there is value in carrying out employee engagement. The key issue probably to ask yourself is that what percentage of employees, especially in Zimbabwe, are actually engaged, and what are the trends in terms of those engagement levels within the country? You may find that interesting statistics that we will share at the end. So let's start with the definition of employee engagement. We have been doing employee engagement service for the past 20 years, and one of the things that we've observed is that people are coming up with their own definitions of employee engagement, their own instruments. There's nothing wrong with that. The challenge comes when it now comes to the reliability and validity of the instrument that you're using. So you can't then make substantive decisions without necessarily producing a reliable instrument for measuring employee engagement or a valid instrument for measuring employee engagement. That's the challenge that we normally see, especially in practice. So when you look at employee engagement, it's a positive work-related state of mind characterized by vigor, dedication, and absorption. And we'll explore those further. Then the other issue is that when you look at it in simple terms, you are looking at when people bring their whole selves to work, basically they're emotionally, cognitive, and physically attached to the work such that they exert discretionary effort. The key word is that when people are engaged, they engage discretionary effort. What is the advantage, or what is the point of raising the issue of discretionary effort? The point is that when someone exerts discretionary effort, it means they are not going to be pushed. They are not being forced to do what they're doing. They're applying themselves in full, both emotionally, cognitively, and physically. That's what normally happens when people then are engaged. So let's also look at what engagement is not. For those that understand psychology, you would know that there is a lot of talk around job satisfaction. Engagement is not job satisfaction. Job satisfaction as a construct is already measured extensively in psychology and well researched. That's what you find. So it's actually a bit different, and commitment is also different. But I do know that in practice, a lot of people, what they do is that they mix all these things, and there's nothing wrong with that as long as you know that you are mixing these issues. But if you want to purely measure employee engagement, you are looking at active investment in the work and the energy and involvement that someone applies in that kind of work. That's the difference. Someone can be satisfied, but definitely not necessarily immersed in the work that they are doing. So it doesn't necessarily follow that when someone is immersed in the work that when they are satisfied, that they will apply themselves entirely within the work that they are doing. That's the challenge that you find. The same applies with commitment. Even if you look at some of the research, you notice that job satisfaction does not necessarily lead to better performance. The relationship is actually very weak when you look at job satisfaction versus engagement. Yeah, it's not a massive gain that you get even from employee engagement, but it's significant enough for business leaders to care, unlike your job satisfaction. And others have started talking about being happy. Yes, employees can be happy, but it doesn't necessarily follow that happy employees will lead to better performance. All these are considerations that you must take into consideration as you're looking at employee engagement. I thought I should just explain that in advance. So when you look at William Kahn, you will notice that when you look at engagement, they are looking at the cognitive part, the emotional part, the physical part. I'm sure even as you work yourself in the work that you do, there are days in times when you feel I'm really loving what I'm doing and you're exerting discretionary effort, the boss is not pushing you, your colleagues are not pushing you, you just like what you're doing, you're enjoying what you're doing. And that's what we are actually focusing on as engagement. But we also do know that, so there is a difference between work engagement, which is basically the scientific or the psychological construct that has been studied extensively, which is the work engagement, compared to employee engagement in its broader term. This is when you say employee engagement, mostly you're looking at the relationship between the employee and the policies that the organization has. It could be remuneration, it could be supervision, it could be leadership, it could be training and development. That kind of engagement is actually employee engagement, not necessarily work engagement. So there's a distinction between the two. And when we do our employee engagement survey, which we broadly called employee engagement survey, we actually included the two, the two of them. So we look at employee engagement, we also look at work engagement. But if you look deeper, you'll find that the more extensive research has been done on work engagement rather than employee engagement. So far, from my experience doing the employee engagement surveys and also sitting elsewhere, maybe as a board member and looking at employee engagement, you will notice that what people are calling employee engagement is a mixture of a variety of issues, sometimes not consistently measured. Those issues are not being consistently measured, and people are just calling them employee engagement. So it's important to separate that. There are times when organizations are doing an employee opinion survey. You just want to find out how your employees are feeling. There's nothing wrong with that, but you must then call it an employee opinion survey rather than calling it a work engagement survey. Or you may want to call it an employee engagement survey. The terms can be used interchangeably. So what exactly are we talking about here? We are saying people really get engaged when they see that what they're doing is worthwhile and valuable to them. That's when they really get engaged. We also see that people get engaged when they feel that they are safe, what you call psychological safety, basically. What are the consequences of you speaking up and raising your concerns without necessarily being punished by either colleagues or rebuked by either colleagues or bosses. And the second part is, do I have the resources to be able to do what I need to do? That all forms part of that. So let's look at the work engagement as studied in scientific research. And this is something that I think anyone doing employee engagement must not ignore, because it really goes to the core of whether your employees are actually engaged or not. That's why I'm highlighting it at this stage, so that at least you may do your employee engagement. Remember, I emphasize that there is employee engagement where you're really looking at the interaction between your employees as they work with the environment, the pay, the supervision that they receive, the leadership, how they perceive the strategy, how they see the training opportunities and everything. That is called employee engagement broadly. But there is what is called work engagement, where you're looking at the actual engagement with the work that people do, not necessarily with the environment, but with the work that they are doing. So there are three key aspects of that. The key dimensions or constructs under that is a way you're looking at whether someone is working with high energy, resilience, and they're being persistent in what they're doing, regardless of the challenge that they're facing. Then you also look at dedication, which is the strong involvement, pride, and enthusiasm that someone gets as they're doing the job. Then you look at absorption, where someone works in a particular role and they are so immersed in it that they don't even know how time is passing. Those are the three components of what is called work engagement. Sometimes you may find employee engagement, as we define it, in terms of how an employee relates to their employer, basically, how the employee relates to their employer in relation to policies, remuneration, supervision, leadership, strategy, training, opportunities, teamwork, and all those things. That's the component that we're calling the employee engagement side. Then the work engagement is where we look at vigor, dedication, and absorption. Our experience is that sometimes you find that the employee engagement index is up, but the work engagement is actually down, or vice versa. And you must be concerned if that happens, because each one of them is pointing into a certain direction. If the work engagement is so low compared to benchmarks, it could actually mean that the way you have designed the work is not stimulating the level of critical thinking and engagement that employees would want to be able to exert themselves and also apply discretionary pressure. That I think I have already talked about. So what are the key issues that you need to look at as you are looking at employee engagement in terms of just stimulating employee engagement? One of the key ones is autonomy. Does the person really have the power to do what they need to do without much interference? The social support, the quality of the relation with the manager and team also tend to affect how people then get to engage with their work, not necessarily with the engagement with the policies, but their work. Then regular feedback and acknowledgement that we give to the employee. Role clarity is also key in terms of that. Do people really have clear expectations and sources? My experience is that sometimes when you look at, we talk to people, you find that they'll tell you, I actually don't know what I'm supposed to do. I'm just doing work. You can imagine that person is going to lack resources. That person is going to probably struggle to understand what is it that is expected of them, because the structure of the work itself is not supportive of someone who can actually deliver on what they're supposed to deliver. Okay, then the other issues is really to do with self-efficacy. When someone believes in their ability to perform, it tends to affect work engagement. The resilience part, capacity to bounce back, again, it affects the engagement. Just the level of optimism that they have about the future and expectations also does affect how they interact with their job. Then the emotional side around the job is also critical as on the work engagement side. Okay, so how do leaders impact engagement? Providing resources is key. They also impact work demands because they do allocate the work as the supervisors, and also personal resources does affect how people then get engaged in the work environment. So why does engagement matter? I'm sure you may have seen a lot of studies that are being done. I know there's a lot of debate about the Gallup 12. The challenge with the Gallup 12 is that ordinarily and scientifically, it's very difficult to measure various dimensions by using just one question. It tends to affect the reliability of the questionnaire that we are using. That's why for those that have been following on LinkedIn, you may have seen that Gallup is being lambasted by some professors from some of the top universities in terms of sending alarmistic kind of messages in terms of the instrument that they're using and complaining that people are disengaged and things like that. But the instrument that they're using is not the work engagement, the validated work engagement instrument. It's theirs that they're using, which has not really been subjected to a lot of scientific studies because they don't share their data most of the time for people then to be able to scrutinize and see whether the instrument that they're using is reliable and also whether the instrument is valid. Overall, I think reliability will be there, but when you look into the dimensions of those, you may find challenges. So what have been found out of some of the meta-analysis studies that have been done? Meta-analysis is a grouping of high-quality studies that have been produced, and they are amalgamated to see if there are consistent results throughout those results. So you can see from this meta-analysis of 7,900 business units and 36 companies, they found that employers or organizations that have got more highly engaged employees, they've got higher profitability generally, and there's a boost of productivity of about 17%. They experience low turnover of about 59% compared to the other ones who are below the median in terms of employee engagement. Then better customer ratings, they also get better customer. I think it goes without saying that if you do employee engagement and you find that your engagement index is below 50 or the median, you may need to really think about it. And there are organizations that do get below 50 50% index. The engagement index is calculated by taking all positive responses over total responses. That's how you get. So you go to each question and say, assuming you're using agree, strongly agree, disagree, strongly disagree, you go and say how many people for question number 1 have actually responded agree and strongly agree. Let's say you've got 10 people and find it's 90% people, 9 out of 10 have actually responded positively to that. Because there's positive, you can divide positive and negative there. So you then count and say, okay, so for question 1, it's 90% engagement index. You go to the next question, then you average per dimension. You average per question, then average per dimension until you get the average. That's how you calculate it. In simple terms, that's how you calculate the percentage employee engagement index. That's the index that you get. Others, I do know that they do average the score per question. So if you got a rating of 1 to 4 or 5, you then get the averages of that, but that is not called an index, just average engagement score, which you must then indicate out of whatever percentage you are using. You can still convert it to an index if you want. For example, if you find that your average engagement is 3 out of 6, as an example, it means you are at 50% on average. There are various disadvantages of the various methods of using that, but the straightforward calculation that is simpler for executives to understand is just the positive responses over total response that give you the employee engagement index. So there are other dimensions where employee engagement has been found to have an impact. Locally, what we have tried to do with some of our clients is that we are collecting a lot of data as we speak, and as we in collecting that data, we want to be able to link the employee engagement to performance. We did a study in 2021 where we looked at a retail chain. We looked at the employee engagement by branch, more than 60 branches, and we found that stock 10 and a few other indicators were at a positive relationship with employee engagement. Others did not. But when we did further analysis, we then found that our sample was slightly small, and with a much bigger sample, we could actually probably have found better results. But don't expect to go and say employee engagement will solve all of your business problems. No, it won't. It actually gives you a pointer into the problematic areas. And if you go and address those pointers, you then have a chance of getting positive results out of it. So employee engagement has got a multiplier effect in terms of higher engagement, increased productivity, greater profitability. Because remember what actually, if you look at employee engagement, not work engagement, for example, you will notice that what then lead to the increase in business outcomes is not necessarily the engagement, is the facets that you are measuring. For example, good leadership or good management has always had a good, positive relationship with the actual performance of individuals and organizations. So if your engagement scores are showing that you've got poor management practices, naturally it will affect how people then are managed and how people then are produced and eventually affect profitability. The same applies with leadership in general, and other facets. For example, teamwork, it has an impact on productivity and how people then perform. The same applies with the opportunities for learning and growth. We're assuming that people are gaining better skills. For example, if you're getting better skills in AI and others, it means you're being capacitated then to produce more. That's the link that people are missing when they're looking at employee engagement. Then there is also a component. For example, people always argue that do salaries really lead to better performance? No. So far, there is no scientific research to support that paying people more will produce more better performance, unless someone has got better scientific evidence. But so far, no. So you don't go and say, you know what, our employees are unhappy, let's just increase their salaries and productivity will go up. So far, there's no connection. And we're also not saying that underpay people. No, you don't necessarily have to pay underpay people. Pay them competitively, pay them in line with what they're producing, pay them sustainably, rather than going blanketly to recommend to your executives that people are being underpaid. That's why we are losing. What does happen is that, yes, lower salaries and competitive salaries does affect issues to do with turnover. People who are underpaid, they also tend to turn over. And if they are good people, naturally it will affect how the business performs. So you can see the intricacies in terms of the linkages around the various factors that you measure in employee engagement. So engagement is a distinct measurable with clear dimensions, as I already alluded to. It has got antecedents. Antecedents are those facets that actually drive engagement. Those are what I will call antecedents. For example, personal resources, job resources, leadership. Then it has got business impact exists. In a way, we are saying you start with the antecedent, you go to your employee engagement, you then go to the business outcomes that you want. It could be service, it could be profitability, it could be productivity, it could be retention or turnover. All those are business outcomes that are affected by these various facets. So when we measure employee engagement as industrial psychology consultants, which is the IPC, what are the things that we measure? This is what I was telling you to say, yes, we do measure employee engagement, and those are the dimensions that we measure. We measure strategic direction, focusing on whether employees understand where the business is going and how they see their role in that business in that strategic direction. Leadership are the leaders walking the talk in terms of the goals and whatever they're doing. Communication in general is very straightforward. Relationship with work colleagues tend to measure the teamwork and the collaborative environment within the organization. Then supervision, we are looking at the immediate supervisor. Do they give feedback? Are they clear on the goals to be achieved? Do they give support to their employees? Learning and development, does the employee feel that they're getting the opportunity and support for them to learn new skills? Then remuneration, compensation, benefits. Basically, we are looking at whether people think the remuneration is fair, not necessarily that it's enough. It's fair and equitable. That's the focus of that dimension. Commitment and loyalty, generally checking whether people are committed to work for the organization till they retire. The job design is focusing on the actual job itself, then overall satisfaction there. We also do measure what is called intention to leave. For those that love research in psychology, I'm sure you may have come across this, which is basically your retention risk. So we ask the employee, if they were to find an opportunity now, would they leave, as we are collecting that. The advantage of doing that as you're doing your survey is that you can then correlate all these dimensions with that intention to leave. For example, if you find, in some cases, we find that 50% of the staff members actually saying they are ready to leave, that's a huge risk for your business. In some cases, you find it as low as 20%, 30%, and like that. But it doesn't necessarily mean those people are leaving. It just means there is a retention risk. And normally when you go back to research, you find that you discount that number. For example, if you find that your intention to leave is as high as 50%, you discount by a factor of 10, which means your retention risk will be 40%. That's how you look at it. But anyway, anything above 10 and above percent, it means it's actually a huge risk for your organization. But we also correlate and then say, what is driving that among those factors that you are seeing there? Is it leadership? Is it strategic direction? Is it communication? Is it remuneration? All that comes out because we then run a regression model that will be able to predict the intention to leave. And you must then focus on that to reduce the risk of people leaving. You may want to say, okay, the key driver of intention to leave, our intention to leave is learning and development, or lack of learning and development opportunities, poor remuneration, bad supervision. Let's say, for example, that's what we found in your data. It doesn't apply in every situation. It's specific to every organization. Once we find that, in our recommendation, then we'll ask you to dig deeper and say, what are the problematic areas? Especially sometimes when people have completed the questionnaires, they also put comments. We sift through those comments and pass out each of those comments into those categories and say, okay, under supervision, what are people saying? Under learning and development opportunities, what are people complaining about? Under remuneration, what are the people complaining about? Once you've identified those, you can then say, what is it that we can do to address these issues? Naturally, we find that those that lead to intention to leave, they will be scored lower in general compared to the rest of the other dimensions. You can then narrow in on the issues that people are concerned about. Remember, one of the reasons for employee engagement is to get a pulse of the feeling, or how are employees feeling within your organization? What are the challenges that they're experiencing within the organization? Besides all the scientific hype and everything that we're talking about, just general feel of how your employees are feeling about the organization. It's a massive plus, a massive starting point for any business leader to be able to then say, okay, people are not happy with training and development. Should we ignore that? People are not happy with the remuneration. Should we ignore that? Sometimes, for example, when you go into remuneration, for example, what we have noted is that employees do not necessarily complain about the level of remuneration. They complain about fairness. John and Sam are in the same role, but John is earning 5 times than Sam. And why? The people need to know that this is where you should do job evaluation and other processes come in. So all these are issues that are critical. For example, you may go to the supervision. I know in one organization, after the results came out, it's about 5 years ago now, what they then did is they found that the supervision was the leadership were the problematic areas. They'd go and do a 360-degree assessment, leadership and supervisor assessment to see what are the issues coming out of there, where you ask the subordinate, co-workers, customers, in some instance, the boss to assess each individual manager. And eventually they then found that the 360-degree assessment was also correlated with supervision, was correlated with engagement, and things. That's, for me, those are the insights that you want when you do this kind of service. They are pointers. They give you the symptoms. They are not the causes. They give you the symptoms. The causes may be deeper than what you find through a questionnaire. This is why it's also necessary, once your employee engagement results are out, you then go and do your focus group discussions to dig deeper into the issues that may be of concern. Where recently people have been also hyping about work-life balance. It's one of the measures that we have included. The good news about our instrument on employee engagement, for example, which is the top part, is that myself, Mr. Shomui and myself, we then did a validation, what is called the constraint validation study, to then say, are these things that the questions that we are putting under each, are they really measuring the things that we want? And we streamlined the questionnaire ourselves to make sure that the questionnaire actually measures what it is. So this is a validated questionnaire, just not an ordinary questionnaire. Even if you're using a validated questionnaire, sometimes we agree with clients who say, can you customize for our own particular use? We do, but our main concern most of the time is that before we do the final analysis of the results, once we've collected the data, we also run a reliability analysis to see if the questionnaire is reliable. Anything below 0.7, we get worried that the questionnaire may not actually be reliable. Then the last part on that slide is the work engagement dimension. I went to town already about what is involved in the work engagement. This is the most validated current instrument available on employee engagement. It measures vigor, it measures dedication and absorption. But we do know that managers want you to measure things like, are people happy with remuneration? Are people happy with leadership? That's why we've got the employee engagement dimensions at the top. But most of those, they have no scientific basis. In our case, at least we have done the concept validation. What is left is for us to do, to correlate that to actual business performance, to see that this is of value and does it have any impact. We did that with the one retail company. We did find some more correlations with actual business outcomes. But we need to do more. That's why you need to constantly do your employee engagement. Some do quarterly, some do half yearly, some do once a year. But sometimes it's too late for you to do 9 months, 12 months, then to only discover that your employees have been unhappy since February. Imagine the amount of opportunities that you may have missed. With the technology now, these things can be run on it. You can actually just deploy it today, tomorrow you've got the results. In actual fact, you can see the results live as they're coming into the organization. And this can be deployed seamlessly with technology. And I'll show you our technology, but I will not demonstrate today at the end of this particular presentation. So this is the combo of what we measure in terms of employee engagement. It doesn't invalidate what you're already doing. If it's working for you, continue doing that. But you must worry whether the questionnaire that you're using is valid, is reliable and valid. And there are ways of checking that statistically, what you can do about that. Okay, so the key challenge that we see in practice that people spend millions in dollars on employee engagement only to throw away the results, simply because the results are not palatable or the results are not what they expected. So they don't then act on those results. They ignore the results. So what happens next time? You want to go back to your employees to then say, can we do another survey? The employees ignore you. The response rate start going down significantly and things like that. So don't do employee engagement if your management or leadership is not committed to take action. And taking action in this instance is not giving people money or addressing all the issues that they have raised. Taking action is to say, okay, we've looked at these issues. There are 20 themes or items, critical issues, priorities that are coming out of the engagement survey. We can, given our resources, we can tackle 5 this quarter, the next 5 in the following quarter, the next 5 in the following quarter, and the other 5 we have no resources to be able to tackle them. They are long term. Let your employees know what you can do and what you can't do after you've done any form of survey. And this does not apply to employee engagement alone, but any form of survey. Let your employees know that this is what you can do and this is what you can do. And next time, once you start doing that, people start, you see that your level of responses tend to increase much higher. But I do know that in practice, most people do employee engagement because the board has said go and do employee engagement, or it's part of some performance contract of the CEO. After the results are out, they celebrate that they've done the engagement and throw it away. For me, that's a waste of resources and a lost opportunity for any leader to be doing that. Other engagement mistakes, people then treat symptoms. Remember, I said the questionnaire will not be able to tell you why things are happening. It will tell you the people are unhappy with the remuneration. It will tell you people are unhappy with the leadership, but it won't tell you why. The why can only be unearthed when you go deeper through focus group discussions. And we've done that when we do focus group discussions. Okay, the issue of implementation, we've already talked about that. Then there is also a tendency to then do generic initiatives to address the issues. You must go there. Most of the time when we go and talk to the employees ourselves through focus groups, they will tell you what needs to be done in the hour. Most of them, because they're on the ground, they're interfacing with the customer. They're on the ground, they know. But obviously you need to weigh and sift through whatever they are. Some of the things are speculative, some of the things are more bargaining, collective bargaining kind. So you go through and say, what is realistically possible given our circumstances? So instead of how do we improve engagement, you must then ask yourself, what is engagement telling us about our business? And remember, the whole purpose of you doing the engagement is to help the business perform. So if you're going to do engagement as an HR initiative and end there, you're just wasting your time. I would rather you don't do it at all. You must then say, when we measure engagement, we want certain business outcomes to happen. And this is our hypothesis for doing that. We are doing engagement and we think that the findings are going to affect A, B, C, D. If you have already been collecting information, start putting side by side. This is the engagement 2021, this is the engagement 2022, 2023, 2024. Are we seeing any pattern? Even without going statistical, are we seeing any pattern? With visualization tools now, you can actually visualize and see if they are moving in tandem. Okay, without necessarily going correlation or regression, you can see whether there is value in that. Once your leadership is mature enough in terms of understanding these things, you can then go deeper into the statistical analysis. Okay. So how do you maximize the employee engagement generally? Use engagement surveys to identify which specific areas are flagging problems. I want to emphasize, use engagement to identify which specific areas are flagging problems. That's very key. Then step number 2, map each engagement issue to foundational issues. Is it low autonomy? Is it low trust? Is it low growth? All those are areas, but this is just an example, but you can go deeper than that. Then the number 3, you fix the system, address the broken fundamental, not the symptom. Okay? If the people have complained about leadership, there's probably 1 or 2 leaders who are very toxic in the business. You need to go and address those toxic leaders. You may go deeper and find, no, these people are not going to change. Are they performing? Those 2 leaders who are causing havoc in the business, they are not performing. Sometimes it's better to part ways than creating a toxic environment for the whole organization. Then engagement improves naturally as the system aligns. So as you align these steps, you find that people start feeling the atmosphere, start changing, the engagement level start going up and things like that. We've got one example of a company that we've been working with for the past 10 years, I think now, where we've been doing the engagement service every year. We normally do it around November, December, every year. So the other thing is that when you're doing this engagement service, it's better to do them around the same time so that you don't capture seasonality. So if you are doing them in the last quarter of the year, always do them in the last quarter of the year. If you are doing them in the first quarter, second quarter, whatever period, do them consistently for comparability so that when you look at trends, they are not trends that are coming out as a result of seasonal changes, so that you can actually look at the changes. But if I look at a bank, if I look at a retail shop with many branches, you don't necessarily have to wait to do many engagement surveys. For example, if you've got more than 30 branches or locations, and you've got people there, what you can do is just go and do an engagement survey now. And immediately after the results are out, look at the performance of each of those branches and compare with the engagement scores. Normally, you see a pattern that comes. You can actually run a very good statistical regression or correlation model out of that. That's the beauty of those that are located across. You don't necessarily have to have time series data where you collect this year, next year, or quarter for you to be able to see a trend. But with the locations, for example, banks, retail shops, and anyone with branches, any organization with branch, it's very easy to do this, what I'm telling you. And you'll see what I'm telling you that you can actually pinpoint and say, oh, this is why this branch has got performance problems. Leadership is rated low. Supervision is rated to low. Teamwork is rated to eventually personifying a very toxic environment in that. So there's a lot of permutation that you can do without necessarily belaboring some of the complex stuff that normally people want to go through. So let's look at some of the National Employee Engagement Index for Zimbabwe since 2010. That is how far we've been collecting the data. 2010, since 2010, that's almost 14 years now. And we've been collecting this data every year. We consolidate the data from the survey that we do every year. We also run what is called the National Employee Engagement Survey, which we are launching just now, immediately after this. We are launching the National Employee Engagement Survey, where we actually publicly look at Zimbabwean employees across sectors, not necessarily in your organization, just for benchmarking. So we've got a database of about 60,000 Zimbabwean employees. We distribute the questionnaire to all those 60,000 employees. We tabulate the data so that we can then compare. When we do the organization by organization, which we obviously do these last 4 months, that's where we do most of our surveys. We then put that together and compare and consolidate to get the number that we are seeing there. So you can see there have been fluctuations. There could be explanations for that. I don't know what was happening in 2017 to such an extent that the employee engagement went low. Then also 2012, you can see there. You can see our lowest employee engagement was in 2010. I think we're coming out of a very terrible period, hyperinflation. You can see 2010 jumped in 2010-11. I'm sure you also know by that time, that's when probably our peak GNU performance in 2011. That's when things were really happening. Everyone was really living the best of their lives in terms of the economy, in terms of company performances. That's 2011 there. Then it went up significantly in 2015, because this is now national. We at this stage, we don't know. We hope that at some stage we will be able to correlate these numbers with national numbers, GDP, inflation, and all those other things to see if there are any relationships. We do have enough data now for us to be able to do that. Then from 2016 to 2017 went down significantly. Then it jumped again in 2018 and steadily going up, as you can see from that. Then it went down significantly in 2023, then up again in 2024. So that's the National Employee Engagement Survey. So the benchmark data we do have for all those years, we have got benchmark data for that. How do I close that? So then what are the most why is it not moving? Sorry. Okay, so so some of the most frequently asked questions, how frequently should we conduct, is entirely up to you. But if you got the technology, you can do it as many times as you want a year. Some do it quarterly, actually others track every month. depending on the technology that they have, and also depending on the intervention that they have. For example, if you're going through change, some tend to track that post before the change and after the change. I know one organization that tracks every month because they've got the technology. So when you come in, but it's shorter version. When you come into the organization, you come in like now you have a pop-up that says, how satisfied are you with this kind of change that we are undertaking? Unhappy and everything. So you get real-time data. My challenge is that sometimes leaders do wait for a very long time when things are deteriorating without collecting the data. So the more frequent, the better. But that normally happens if you got the technology. How long does it take to see the results from the engagement? If you're using our platform, you see the results real time, live, immediately after that. If you're in HR, you will have your dashboard in front of you as people are completing. But you won't see who is completing what, but you can see the dashboard and which department and whatever, how many people have completed and all those things. You will see all those things as you do the engagement. So that question is answered. What are the best engagement strategies that can work? There is no best strategy that can work. There is, yes, some that have been found to through research, the scientific leadership, supervision, the environment itself, the teamwork, the collegial environment tend to affect engagement significantly. But some of the things are context-based. That's why I was saying that when you do your focus group discussions, this is when you then find that certain things come out, people suggest this is how we can resolve these issues. How do we get leaders buy-in for engagement initiatives? By this time, any leader who ignores engagement, I don't know why they are leading anyway, because the engagement is really the heartbeat of how you get the pulse of how your people feel about the organization and the work that they're doing. So that's basically what we are saying. So if any employer or any organization is going for a year or more without gauging the level of engagement within the organization, what are they doing from an HR point of view? I really don't understand that. Do you want to get to 2 years and then understand that your employees were unhappy in 2022 and they're still unhappy until now? You lose opportunities, business opportunities. You lose opportunities to improve performance generally. Because when people are not happy, they will not exert themselves. It's as simple as that. When people are not attached to what they're doing, they will not exert themselves. They'll do the bare minimum in order to survive. And you are competing with an organization that is probably doing a lot of initiatives around making sure that people feel that they are really loved and valued within the organization. How do you sustain engagement levels? Again, once the data is in, you can actually look at the permutation. They will tell you what actually drives engagement more in your own particular environment, not necessarily depending on what others are doing, but in your own particular environment. Okay, so when you look at our platform, it's called Engage Plus. That's the platform. That's the screenshot of the platform. It will generate action plans for you automatically once the survey is complete, and the things like that. For those that want to get a demo, Mtulis and team can actually show you a demo of how the system works. We can actually empower you to administer internally, or we can administer it for you and things like that. Both us administering the platform, the advantage is that people then feel secure, especially in environments where there's low psychological safety, where people feel that they may be identified and things like that. This one is watertight in terms of security and identification. You can then allow managers to see the results as the engagement is happening. For example, you can allow all your executives to have access to the full results as they happen. The moment that people start filling in, they can explore the results in detail. Even preliminary results, it will allow them to do that. The good thing about this one is that custom design of the questionnaire, any survey that you want, we can do it in this particular platform in Engage Plus. Smart deployment across all platforms. Okay, QR code, WhatsApp. You can deploy via all the forms of communication that you want. We also, if you do add questionnaires, we scan them and put them there. It will deploy the questionnaire correctly in terms of the responses. Real-time data collection and response tracking, then advanced analytics in terms of dashboards, basically predictive analytics as well. If you've been doing the surveys correctly. Then you can deploy a one-question survey, a questionnaire. Are you happy with us as an employer, for example? Let's say it's a company, a bank, a retail organization, you employ 1,000 people. And you just want to find how people are feeling. How are you feeling today? Maybe this is before the change. Then a week later, you've introduced something. How are you feeling today? You can do, the system will be able to do the comparisons. Then the action plans come automatically based on what people have said, based on the result, the quantitative results, and also based on the comment that people will have put there. Okay, so it will tell you the over engagement immediately. It will also show you the response rate. This is just a small demo. The heat maps are also in there. It will give you all these heat maps based on the dimension that you will have put in there. There are other various. It will run correlations for you. Remember, we're talking about correlations to predict intention to leave and where are the strongest the relationship between the various dimensions, or that the system will do the heat maps for correlations. So what we are excited to then tell you that we are launching a national employee engagement survey, and we want to hear from you. They will then send a link to various people in terms of the national employee engagement survey. This is an open employee engagement survey just for benchmarking across organizations. But if you want your own internal customized specific employee engagement survey, we do those more frequently. We actually run those throughout the whole year. We've just completed one. We completed one in Malawi, and you know what the bit about the one that we did in Malawi is that immediately when we presented the results, we said we actually knew these results are not new, but we just didn't have the information. That's what the CEO said. And we then said, look, you need to commit to address some of the things. Some of the things were really minor, did not need resources. For example, if you find that there's a very toxic manager who is affecting engagement and eventually customer service, maybe they're leading a customer service division, you can't ignore that when the business is going away. You really need to take action. And not, it's just not as HR, but the HR is leading that intervention, but also the CEO taking hand of those issues and make sure that the issues are really addressed. So, yeah, so for anyone here and any organization that would really want us to showcase the employee engagement platform, the automated platform for doing a massive employee engagement, for doing a one-question employee engagement, for doing a short dipstick survey, all that we can do for you. I thank you. So I can take questions. I can take questions. Okay, it seems there are no questions. So Mtulis and team, I think you need to share the recording with everyone who attended. Please put your email in the chat box so that we can send